I'm just going to actually really quickly close my door because there's a lot of pardon. Oh yeah, it seems like we have a good number of people here already. We need to actually end the meeting today promptly at 12:15 because we have another meeting to go to. So I wanted to make sure that we just sort of dive right into what's on the agenda, what we want to talk about. And of course, these conversations, anything that isn't addressed, they can continue to the next meeting. But yeah, I wanted to maybe get started, and as people trickle in, we can get them caught up to speed. And so I know you all, I don't know if everyone had the chance to, we sent you the early draft of the community chapter for Rowland Heights from the San Diego Valley area plan. So that's I think the primary thing on the agenda we should probably talk about. And the secondary thing, hopefully we can get to it, and if not, we can get to it at another meeting, is about equestrian uses and equestrian districts potentially in Rowland Heights. So we've heard some interest about at least certainly acknowledging the equestrian uses, but also potentially seeing if there's any desire for an equestrian district in at least a couple of places that we are aware of where there's equestrian. So yeah, I hope you're all doing well. Here's what I'm gonna just start off sharing my screen. I'll pull up the plan, and I think I did get all emails and comments, and I really appreciate that you all brought up some really good points, and so we can talk about those as well. But I wanted to really focus on the goals and policies and implementation actions, because those are essentially what gets, those are the elements of the chapter here that guides development. Everything else in the issues and opportunities is mostly just analyzing the built environment, looking at it in comparison to what some of the goals in the general plan are. And I did see comments on those as well, and all also very valid points. But when we're looking at stuff, we're kind of looking at it through the lens of the general plan and what the general plan kind of general approach to smart growth is. And again, the reason why we have the community chapters is that every community also has its unique circumstances and context as well. Sure, Teri.
Yes. Can we start off by kind of reviewing some of the comments we made and knowing what's going to happen to our comments?
Sure. Hold on, why don't I pull up the plan, and then that way I can go to what parts of your comments. Yeah, let me do
Debbie, that. I don't see Debbie Enos right now, but I know I have a copy of her comments, and she went over each section, and I know I had two general ones, and Linda Cool, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, had quite a few too.
Sure. Hold on,
let me open up what happens to our input.
Sure, and we can talk about your input. That's definitely part of what we're going to do today. Let me open up the plan so I can share it with you, and then we can refer directly to whatever parts of it you bring up. Let me just share my screen, and that way we can talk specifically. Can you all see my screen? Great. And so I don't get to see everyone when I'm in the screen sharing mode. So feel free to to jump in. I may not see the hands raised, and I may not see your raised either through Zoom or raised in real life. So I'm trying to get a view that has more people showing, but it's not giving me that. I don't know why.
Do you have Debbie Enos's comments? Because with the screen share, it kind of takes over everything, and I can't click on her comments. And I know she addressed each section.
I did get her email, and I got a forward from you. And she had only, I think, sent comments about sort of the more background research, the issues and opportunities. And she said, I think in an email or somewhere, that she was going to follow up with comments on the goals, but I did not get that.
Okay, because I've got her comments, I just can't get it because I'm full screen and I'm not savvy enough to.
You can exit out of full screen. I think if you do like maybe escape, it will let you show
Okay.
different things sort of side by side. Did that work?
Yeah, but I lost your full screen. Oh wait, I guess I do have it. Let me pull hers up because I think she went through each section.
Okay. But I want us to focus on the goals and policies because that's going to be what guides development. And any other comments, feel free to email them, and we'll review them, and we can talk, through email about any of the background information. So I know there was comments on some of the kind of built form analysis, and some of that informs the goals for sure. But some of it is also just sort of acknowledging what exists and if it's appropriate to address it in different ways or not. Like I know there was concerns about road widening. That is not something that we are proposing in the goals and policies. Like, I know that I remember that being a comment from Debbie. And I know we talk about congestion, which is something that comes up in District Line, right? And it's a sort of a reality, but we are not proposing, we are not supportive of road widening because it is growth inducing, and we do get that. So that is on the table. In fact, in some areas where we've seen that Orange County is widening roads on their part, we actually have policies in here to ensure that we do not widen those same roads when they cross the boundary. And that was something that came up, I think, with Orange County. I think it was maybe one of the eastern roads that go there. So we are aware of those issues, and we are certainly aware that widening is growth inducing, and that's not something that we recommend.
I think Debbie was against it just because it would bring more traffic.
And that's understandable, but there's nothing in our policies that promotes road widening, and that we're not proposing that. And again, Public Works, we've talked with them about some of the road widening in Orange County, and they are also not proposing any road widening for those same roads on Public Works part either. So the goals and policies that you see here, these are what will, as a very preliminary draft, which is why we wanted to bring it to this smaller group initially, because you all are familiar with planning and zoning on a pretty strong basis. But we're also going to bring this to a larger visioning group, to a larger community-wide group as well in the spring. So this is not the only time that you will see it. It's not the only time. Certainly the community will also see it those times. So yeah, this is just a very early draft, and we wanted to get early feedback and early eyes on it. So we kind of know what are the holes, what are the concerns, is there anything we're missing, things like that. So, and also certainly any concerns on your part too. And in some cases there's like preliminary wording that could be a little bit, certainly could be refined for sure, based on some of the comments we got in the background research. But I don't know, how would you like to do this, and let me know. Would you like me sort of to go through the initial, I think that here now, the initial goals and policies, is just sort of talking about them, and then you can give me your comments based on each goal, and it's sort of a subset of policies, just to have like make sure we go through all the parts and have like maybe a sequential order, so we make sure that whatever issues you have or concerns or comments or you have about the goals and policies get addressed. It might be maybe just a kind of an orderly way to go through it. So generally, so for the first goal, we're essentially saying for development that does happen, any new development has to be designed so it fits in with the character of the community, that it doesn't sort of disrupt the natural features, so that the grading is blended with the landscape. That's generally what each of the policies also relate to. I remember, Teri, I did read a comment or a concern from you about removing setbacks. That's not something we're proposing with this set of policies. So the setbacks for residential development, they go in the zoning code, and there are ones, specific to the residential zone. That's not changing. This is really primarily about limiting grading, so you don't have any development or redevelopment of a property with a residential. It's not like cutting into the landscape into the topography to a degree that it sort of has like a flattening of slopes, things like that. It's about sort of excessive grading, which happens if we don't have this kind of policy in place. And there's also in the code the hillside management area, which deals with hillside development as well. But this is primarily what this section is about. It's really about
number 6, under limiting grading, the third point. Curb parkways may be eliminated and front yard requirements may be reduced.
Yeah, if it will facilitate less grading and alteration of the site, and only then. So in that sense, this is for and if it's, say, an individual property that's being built next to existing residences, that's something they take into consideration as well when they look at the setbacks. So it should be consistent with what's there. We can write something along those lines if that would clarify that. For anything that's being redeveloped or developed that is on a block with existing properties, that those setbacks will maintain.
What if it's a new development?
If it's a new development, again, they should not be eliminated entirely, but if there's something with the site that says, hey, there will be less grading and alteration of the site in general, they can reduce the front yard requirements if that's something that helps reduce the grading and the impact of the site itself. And this would be something that would have to go through the subdivision process, and they would have to look at it and see, and they would have to justify it and show how the grading would be improved and the alteration of the site would be minimized by reducing the front yard requirements. And only then would they be allowed to do it, and it would be a consideration by how much. So that's something. We're not proposing that it gets eliminated. We're not proposing that. Certainly in developed areas, they have to be consistent with what's on the street. This would be, say, for a new development that's in like some sort of a constrained location where we want to make sure they're not, doing any sort of whatever they can do to minimize the alteration of the site, basically, is in this case saying that would be the better outcome.
Adrienne?
Yeah.
So when I'm reading number 6, it just sounds like it's very arbitrary because there's no number. You just said minimize grading, right? So what does that mean? So do you have like numbers that we could put in? Like how many cubic feet, or I don't know.
That would be something that goes in the code, generally.
Okay.
So the policy is a bit more, the policies in this fund, they set the like general objective. And in the code, like say in a CSD or something, you would have, like I know some CSDs have different permit requirements depending on how much you have to grade. So that's something that can be in a CSD. So generally the policy will sort of just set the umbrella sort of goals, like here's what we want to do. The code itself will set the specific numbers.
Okay, so I would like to propose that we look at the CSD in relations to the grading aspect.
Okay.
This is
Because
Roy.
Sure. Go ahead.
Can I speak? Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
Okay, I'm new to the party here, so forgive me if I'm not totally up on things, but I've read things and like this idea here to achieve a compatibility with a rural community character. That means is the rural character of this community went by that horse left the barn a long time ago. And as I'm assuming that most people are aware of that Diamond Bar is going to annex the Arrow Oil, and they're going to develop it, and it's going to happen exactly when it's in the process, going through the LAFCO and so forth. So it's time to get used to the changes and change accordingly. And these things that you have here are reasonably vague, because I don't think it's within the scope of this operation here to put hard figures on things. That takes engineering and so forth. So that's just a part of my comment on that, and thank you.
Sure, thank you for that comment. And yeah, as far as not rating numbers, like amounts of cubic feet, that's something that has been done in the code. It's not. We're not necessarily saying yes. It's generally like a threshold. If you grade a certain amount, it's one type of permit. If you grade above that amount, it's another type of permit. And that allows projects that might have that might be by right. And again, that would not apply to a subdivision. It would only apply to a home that's going in a residential zone. But if they would have to grade, say, I don't know, 10,000 cubic feet, which is a lot, that might, in some areas, that might require some sort of a different kind of permit, which would have a different level of review, which might require maybe a public hearing or something. It might be a CUP. So that's the kind of thing that I was referring to.
Can we maybe adjust it, and because I foresee how that would be taken with a new development, and they would put in the minimum frontage, no parkways, cut the things so they could make it more dense. But maybe I'd be willing to go within existing areas, make it so it's compatible.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
Within existing developments, separate new developments from existing. I would be more comfortable with that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just going to put a note here.
Hi, this is Debbie. Also, I have a quick comment.
Sure.
So I would imagine that if the Royal Vista project goes through, there would be significant grading as part of that project as well, because of the hilly nature of that site.
Right, and with the Royal Vista, they're going through the subdivision process.
So there are already steps, right?
Right.
Deal? Okay.
Well, we don't have anything in the CSD right now that would relate to Royal Vista. It would go under the Subdivision Code. And so we can talk about this for projects that would be submitted after approval of this. And again, for the CSD specifically, if that would only apply to, say, an individual development, like one property that's being redeveloped or developed. For an entire subdivision, that would always have to go through the subdivision process and go by the subdivision principle. So they would already be going through a permitting process and through a public hearing process. Like in cases of an individual property, like one single, property, one parcel that's going to be potentially redeveloped or developed. Like I was saying, they could be approved with a plot plan that doesn't require a public hearing if they meet all sort of standards of the code. But for some communities where there's a threshold of grading, and say they would go over that grading threshold, then they might be kicked up to a public hearing. So this would really apply to a single property that's being developed or redeveloped as far as the grading issue.
Right. I guess also my comment in more general terms is because my understanding from the planning department is that they were given, the regional planning was given the authority to examine a plan change or a general plan land use change.
Yeah.
Cannot our interests as we are presenting them here today be communicated to that regional planning team so that they take these into consideration? and not in some ways override our general plan because we don't wish our general plan to be so I feel like they haven't been given the authority at this point to approve the project. They're looking at the possibility, and I feel like we shouldn't just alleviate this time in place just because there's two different timings in place to not have it be
have to go by an existing community plan. They have to follow that. But we don't have anything that's legally approved right now for this.
No, I get it. I'm just saying public input.
But as
There
far as
hasn't been a lot
idea-
of public input.
Sure, as far as public input, if you want to say, you know, these are the things that we're interested in, you know, in our community and having, and we're working, these are, you know, what we would like this project to adhere by, those are certainly things you can put up. They just can't analyze the project based on what we're writing, which is very preliminary right now, because it's not legal, well, it's not adopted, right? But those are certainly things you can bring up.
So what about, you said that, you know, the grading would fall under the subdivision code or the subdivision standard. So is it possible for us to review that at some point? Because I assume that also needs to be updated.
So the subdivision code is, that's a whole separate code. I have never done subdivision. It's not something that I should be speaking about. So yeah, I mean, I can look at it, but it goes under a separate review process. They still have to, again, go by the general plan policies that are in effect in the general plan and the community plan policies that are adopted for the community. Those are things that they review. But the specific like development requirements for the subdivision that go in the code, they would go by the subdivision code. But if they're looking, say, at what the use is, in the same way that one of us are applying for a plan amendment, and that's because the general plan and the community plan have it as sort of an an open space category. But the subdivision code is kind of a separate set of requirements that applies to subdivisions. And that's not something we're like that's not something that the CSD goes into either. Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear, but it doesn't make sense because if we're trying to use the CSD as the overall look of the community, but then yet you have a developer that would come in and do something, but that doesn't fall under the CSD, so that doesn't have the overall look of the community, that falls under the subdivision.
What we're primarily doing with the CSD, though, is directed toward the commercial zones, right? We're really looking at development standards in commercial areas. That's separate. And those would fall under the subdivision code. Those would fall under the CSD for commercial development. And that's primarily what we're upgrading for the CSD, right? So that does fall under what we're doing with the CSD. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, can I speak?
Sure.
I don't see, on other issues, they have a thing where you click it and a hand goes up. I don't see that, so that's why I'm putting my hand up there.
No problem.
Yeah, okay, a couple of three issues here. One, I see this: provide a minimum road width if required for safety. People, we need good, wide, proper roads, and if you remember what the county development came up to our meeting at this RCC and wanted to make, this is there, you can see it on my YouTube channel, it was in June 9th meeting, it stated they wanted to make using Fullerton Road painful. And it's right there, I swear it is. So let's get over, let's have good, move the traffic through, we don't need to slow down the traffic. Other thing is for you, and this coming week's supervisors meeting, that they have item 52, and it's called Transportation Core Service Area Traffic Regulations in Unincorporated Communities, and it has on there East LA, Hacienda Heights, but what happened to Rowland Heights? Are we unworthy of consideration? I thought that was kind of amusing. And a point that several persons have raised here, and it needs to be just in the face, just deal with it. And that is, if any development, no matter what it is, meets the basic standards and qualifications for whatever the project is, guess what? There is no public meeting or anything else. It goes through. It's boom, done, and there's almost nothing that you can do about it. And if you want a star example, just go over to Jellic, and at the south end of Jellic, south of Colima, and see that 3-story monster in this residential. It's rather comical. Okay, hey, that's it on my comment. Thank you very much.
Going back kind of a little bit about what Roy said, but you said that this committee is doing commercial, but going back to the grading, when they're talking about parkways and front yard requirements, to me that sounds somewhat residential.
Okay, so again, let me clarify. The CSD update is dealing with commercial, mostly. For the goals and policies for the East San Gabriel Valley Area Plan and for the Rowland Heights chapter of the area plan, that's dealing with the goals and objectives overall. So when, say, any sort of residential project comes in that's a subdivision that will go through the subdivision code, they will also be looking at these general policies for guidelines. So they would say if they wanted to, if we're getting back to the grading issue, and there were some sort of, I don't know, topographic issues with their site, and maybe they had some other, constraints on the site. Say they had some environmental constraints on the site, and the proposal would be, okay, we would cause less alteration in the site, minimize the grading if we reduce the front yards requirements by like 5 feet or something like that, or 10 feet or whatever it is. That would be something we would propose. But what happens generally in the process when the subdivision is reviewing projects, it goes back and forth a lot. The developer will submit their plans. They will review them against the subdivision code, but also against the goals of the general plan, and if there's a community plan, the goals and policies of the community plan. And they will submit, to like a checklist of things that they need to either fix that don't meet the code or that don't meet the general objectives. And so they will submit those comments back to the architects and designers for the developers, and they will have to revise their plans. And so the process kind of goes back and forth quite a bit. Like I'm on the design committee for, it's a design review committee that we've recently started, where they will submit projects, and sometimes they're subdivisions, and they say, hey, there's no walking paths between these units, or the landscaping is, needs to be revised. So it goes back and forth quite a bit. So just to give a little bit of insight into that process. So they can submit, a plan and say, hey, we only want to have 5-foot setbacks because that would reduce the grading by this amount. And then they would kind of have to justify that, and they would have to show why they're doing that, and then we would go back and forth and say, well, 5 feet is too low. What would be your rating or not if you actually had a 10-foot setback instead, or a 15-foot setback instead of the 25? Or we could reference, a policy standard for that, or a policy recommendation for that. And then they would kind of come back and say, well, here would be the numbers, here would be how you would have to alter the site. So it does have a lot of conversation back and forth between them, and generally what they submit initially is not what they get to what they build. Your numbers kind of never happens in a public review, like in a process, in a subdivision process, or a public hearing project process. And again, even for what we say a by right project, which is, say, a use that's in a zone that is, according to the zone designating requirements, they still have their standards that they have to be looked at and reviewed against. So that's kind of, I don't know if you have any other questions about that or concerns. And again, like, whatever wording we want to revise, I can make notes of that and revise them so they're more specific, or look into the CSD options of, different permit requirements and things like that, as far as grading is concerned. If no one has any more comments on grading, I'm going to move to the next goal, so you can kind of keep moving forward. Stop me if we get to it goes too fast. So for goal number 2, it's essentially that new housing is consistent with the maintenance of community character. And one of the things that we're doing countywide and also with this